Alyssa Green doesn't know it yet, but danger has just stepped into her home. Welcome to Crime Corner. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. Alyssa was 28, a black woman who worked as a customer service lead at a small credit union in Monroe. She was dependable, steady, and soft-spoken, the kind of employee managers leaned on when the lobby got chaotic. Co-workers said she made people feel calm without trying. She had a warm laugh, an easy smile, and a habit of listening more than she talked. She had moved into Magnolia Ridge 6 months earlier. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and peaceful. Most tenants were older couples, single professionals, or young families. Alyssa liked that she could hear kids playing outside in the evenings and the sound of neighbors grilling on weekends. It felt safe. Her apartment was decorated simply. Neutral colors, a few plants, framed photos of her family from Baton Rouge. She lived alone but talked to her mother almost every day and FaceTimed her best friend Keisha at least 3 nights a week. Her routine rarely changed. After work, she came home, changed into something comfortable, heated leftovers or cooked something quick, and watched a show while texting friends. She wasn't someone who partied or went out late. Her comfort zone was her home, quiet, clean, predictable. On the day she disappeared, she worked a full shift, stopped at the gas station for orange juice and chips, and then headed home. She showered, put on pajama shorts, and FaceTimed Keisha while folding laundry on the couch. There was no sign she felt unsafe. No sign she was being watched. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. 2 buildings over lived Marquis Hale, a 31-year-old black man who worked sporadically at a tire shop on the edge of town. He had been evicted from 2 apartments in the past 5 years for noise complaints and erratic behavior. Magnolia Ridge gave him one more chance after he claimed he had stable income and references. But neighbors quickly noticed he walked around the complex at odd hours, staring at windows, leaning on railings and pacing near patios long after everyone else had gone inside. Property management had received complaints, but nothing serious enough for immediate eviction. Marquis wasn't openly threatening. He was just unsettling. People avoided him, and he rarely spoke to anyone unless they spoke first. Detectives would later learn that Marquis developed an interest in Alyssa almost immediately after she moved in. Her unit was along his usual walking route, and he often passed her patio at night. He watched her lights turn on and off, watched her let the maintenance staff in, watched her laugh on FaceTime, watched her fold laundry, watched her live her life, but she never noticed him. There was no relationship between them, no conversation, no interaction, no history, but Marquis built a silent routine around her. He knew her schedule. He knew when she was alone. He knew the exact time she usually ended her calls, and he waited for the moment he felt unseen. On the day everything went wrong, Alyssa's routine unfolded the same way it always did. She clocked out of work in the late afternoon, chatted briefly in the parking lot with a co-worker about weekend plans, then headed home in her beige Honda CR-V. She stopped for gas, grabbed a few snacks, and drove back to Magnolia Ridge, parking in her usual spot near Building 6. Security footage captured her carrying 2 bags as she unlocked her door around 5:27 p.m. She turned on the living room light, set her things on the counter, fed her cat, and straightened the couch cushions before settling into her evening. A little later, she FaceTimed her best friend Keisha, and the two talked for almost 2 hours about work frustrations, a show they both kept up with, and an upcoming family birthday. Alyssa paced while she talked, her usual habit, moving between the kitchen, the hallway, and the living room without paying attention to anything outside her windows. Sometime after the call ended, Alyssa went to her bedroom to fold laundry and lay out clothes for the next day. A short while later, she walked back into the living room, holding her phone and a handful of clean towels, placing the phone on top of a stack of clothes as she tidied the table. Nothing was unusual. Nothing was out of place. Nothing made her pause or check the locks, and she never once looked toward the sliding glass door behind her. At the same time Alyssa moved around her apartment, cameras near Building 4 captured Marquis turning the corner, hoodie up, hands in his pockets. He paused near a cluster of mailboxes, then looked down the walkway toward Building 6. Another camera caught him stepping out from behind a parked car, staring toward Alyssa's patio. He didn't appear to be running from anything. He was too calm for that. Instead, he drifted from one walkway to another, watching the windows of two different units before narrowing his attention to a specific door, the one that led into Alyssa's living room. He waited until the walkway cleared. No neighbors were outside, no cars pulled in, no one opened their blinds. The rain earlier that day had quieted the entire complex. He moved closer, step by step, checking the corners, checking the windows, checking the yard. By 9:36 p.m., he stood directly behind her unit. At 9:37, he placed his hand on the patio door handle. Inside, Alyssa laughed while holding her phone. She walked toward the kitchen to grab her drink. She didn't hear the soft scrape of the patio door sliding open behind her. She didn't see the curtain flutter. She didn't feel the rush of cool air. She returned to the living room with her cup, talking about one of their co-workers who always complained during staff meetings. She set the cup down on the table, turned to grab the last folded towel, and froze. The FaceTime screen shook suddenly. A shadow crossed behind her. Alyssa looked over her shoulder. Then the phone hit the floor. The call disconnected seconds later. What happened inside the apartment in those next moments wouldn't be caught on camera. The only clues would come later. Scattered items, a chair pushed the wrong way, a towel lying crumpled beside the couch. There was no extended struggle, no loud crash, no yelling loud enough to alert neighbors. Everything happened with a level of speed and control that shocked investigators later. Alyssa never made it to the front door, never reached her phone again, never screamed loud enough for anyone outside to hear. The intrusion was silent, the danger immediate. Investigators later determined the sequence of events based on the condition of the living room and the autopsy findings. Alyssa was confronted, restrained, and overpowered before she had any chance to defend herself or run. The living room showed signs of minimal disruption. One couch pillow shifted, a towel on the floor, a shoe turned sideways. Nothing indicated a prolonged fight. She was disoriented and silenced quickly. Markey kept control of her inside the home, then moved her out through the patio door only minutes later. A neighbor 2 buildings away reported hearing something, a faint thump, like furniture scraping, but nothing alarming enough to call anyone. The sliding glass door, normally aligned perfectly with its track, was left slightly cracked. This was the last trace of movement inside Alyssa's home before everything went quiet. At 9:49 p.m., the backyard camera recorded Markey stepping out of Alyssa's patio, now holding something under his arm. He didn't run. He didn't appear frantic. He paused, looked over both shoulders, then walked across the yard as if he belonged there. He disappeared behind Building 5, reappeared near the dumpsters 5 minutes later, then walked toward the wooded trail behind the complex A Street camera, recorded him emerging on the opposite side near a drainage ditch. Alyssa never returned to the footage after 9:37 p.m. There were no sightings of her in the parking lot, on the sidewalk, or leaving the complex. Her car remained untouched. By morning, the only evidence she had been inside her apartment was the open patio door and the silent cat-walking circles near her couch. The next morning, Keisha noticed Alyssa hadn't returned any of her calls or messages. At first, she assumed Alyssa fell asleep early, but as the morning went on, she started to worry Alyssa never missed work without letting someone know. When her supervisor realized she hadn't shown up, he tried calling her several times with no success and eventually reached out to her family. Soon after, Alyssa's mother and sister drove to Magnolia Ridge to check on her. Her car was still parked in its usual spot. The curtains were closed, the lights were off, and there was no sign of movement inside the apartment. They knocked on the door. No answer. They called her name through the doorway. Still nothing. Circling around to the back, they saw the patio door sitting slightly open. That was when her mother called 911. When officers from the Monroe Police Department arrived at Magnolia Ridge, Alyssa's mother waited at the front door, pacing in short, anxious lines. She kept telling them something was wrong, that Alyssa never ignored calls and never missed shifts. The officers knocked several times and called out for Alyssa. When they got no answer, they requested maintenance assistance and used a master key to unlock the door. The second they stepped inside, the stillness of the apartment felt unnatural. The living room was neat but strangely unsettled. One couch cushion tilted slightly, a towel lying on the floor despite the rest being folded neatly in a stack near the TV. Alyssa's cat darted from behind the sofa, clearly startled by the sudden activity. The officers moved cautiously through the space, calling her name. The bedroom showed signs of her routine the night before. The bed half covered in folded laundry, a pair of comfortable shorts laid out on top, and a candle that had burned halfway down. Her work bag sat near the closet untouched. Her shoes were lined neatly beside the nightstand. Nothing looked like she had left willingly that morning. The officers then checked the patio door. It had been slid shut, but the lock was off, and the alignment was slightly crooked. Just enough to catch attention, small smudges marked the glass near the handle. The officers stepped out onto the patio and surveyed the grass. The ground still had impressions that could have been from a person's weight, though it was hard to tell for certain. Alyssa was nowhere in the apartment. Her mother cried quietly near the doorway as officers widened the search around the unit. They noted the time, filed an immediate report, and classified the situation as suspicious due to the open patio and the unexplained absence. Within an hour, detectives were on the scene, and yellow tape went up around Alyssa's unit. By noon, Magnolia Ridge residents began gathering outside, whispering about police cars and what might have happened. But no one had seen Alyssa leave. No one had heard anything overnight. No one had noticed the man who slipped into her home only hours earlier. Her disappearance was now officially a criminal investigation. Detectives canvassed the entire complex, knocking on doors and asking for access to any available cameras. Magnolia Ridge had 3 walkway cameras, 1 parking lot camera, and several privately owned doorbell cameras. Every resident who had footage agreed to share it once they learned someone was missing. The first crucial piece came from the townhouse directly behind Alyssa's patio, the camera that captured Marquis slipping into her home. Detectives studied the footage frame by frame. The man's posture, clothing, and movements were unmistakable. He didn't look confused or lost. He moved with clear intent. Footage from the walkway near Building 4 showed the same man heading toward Alyssa's unit earlier in the night. Rain had made the image somewhat grainy, but detectives recognized the same hooded figure and the same baggy jeans. Another video from a resident's Ring camera showed him walking past the parking lot earlier in the evening with his hands in his pockets, scanning the windows as he moved. Detectives gathered every clip, noted the sequence, and synchronized the events. The videos showed him walking through the parking lot, appearing near the walkway, positioning himself by Alyssa's patio, entering her home, leaving shortly after, and emerging again near the wooded trail on the far side of the complex. Alyssa's family confirmed she had been on FaceTime at the same time he entered the apartment, and her phone disconnected moments later. The footage and the call logs matched seamlessly. Detectives concluded the suspect was likely someone who lived in the complex or visited often. He moved without hesitation, knew which paths had fewer cameras, and stayed in the shadows as if he understood the layout better than most residents. Now the only question left was, who was he? Detectives extracted still images from the backyard camera and circulated them to property management. The quality wasn't perfect, but one maintenance worker recognized the suspect's stance immediately. He had seen that same posture dozens of times while repairing broken railings or unclogging drains. "That looks like the guy from Building 3, he said, "the one who always walks around late." Management provided a name, Marquis Hale, Unit 3B. They also provided his tenant file, which contained an ID photo. Detectives compared the ID to the grainy CCTV stills. The facial features were hard to make out, but the height, build, and clothing matched the figure in the videos. Several residents also mentioned seeing Marquis wandering near patios in recent weeks, sometimes staring inside windows long enough to make people uncomfortable. Detectives also learned that Marquis had a history of unstable employment and had once been warned by management for lingering near other residents' units. The warning had never escalated because no one had reported a crime. Now his behavior was taking on a new meaning. The investigators marked him as their primary person of interest and planned to bring him in for questioning. But first, they needed to locate him. Detectives began surveillance on Marcus Building. They positioned an unmarked car near the entrance to observe foot traffic. Around 3:10 p.m., Marquis emerged wearing the same black hoodie seen in the footage. He was carrying a tied black trash bag and heading toward the dumpster area. 2 officers approached him casually. Marquis stiffened as soon as he saw them. One officer asked him if he lived in the complex. Another asked if they could speak with him. Marquis hesitated and gripped the trash bag tighter. When they asked what was inside, Marquis said, "Just trash." But his voice cracked slightly. The officers requested he set the bag down. After a moment of resistance, he dropped it. Inside the bag, detectives found a pair of jeans, a hoodie with a rip on the sleeve, and a phone wrapped in a towel. The case matched the description Alyssa's family gave them. The screen was cracked. The background was her lock screen. That was enough. Marquis was handcuffed and placed into a patrol car. A warrant was issued to search his apartment. Inside his bedroom, detectives found dirty clothes piled on the floor, a knife in his dresser drawer, and a pair of shoes with faint traces of mud matching the grassy area behind Alyssa's patio. The arrest ended the first phase of the investigation. The next step was to find Alyssa. Using location data pulled from Alyssa's damaged phone, investigators traced its final movement to a wooded area about 2 miles from Magnolia Ridge. They organized a search team that included uniformed officers, detectives, and volunteers from the local fire department. After 2 hours, an officer noticed disturbed brush near a small clearing. Beneath a cluster of tall grass and leaves, they found Alyssa's body. She had been placed off the trail, partially concealed by vegetation. The medical examiner transported her to the coroner's office. The autopsy revealed the cause of death was asphyxiation, consistent with sudden, forceful compression. There were no defensive wounds on her hands, no broken nails, no signs of prolonged fighting, suggesting she had been restrained quickly and overpowered in a matter of seconds. Additional injuries on her torso suggested she had been carried or dragged before being placed in the woods. The timeline indicated she likely died within minutes of the FaceTime call ending. Forensics teams matched DNA on Alyssa's sliding door handle, kitchen counter, and hallway walls directly to Marquis. His fingerprints were also found on a glass cup on her table and on the inside of the patio door. Every new detail strengthened the case. The evidence was overwhelming. Marquis was brought into an interview room. Detectives asked him where he had been the previous night. He claimed he was walking around and couldn't sleep. When they showed him the still images from the backyard camera, he looked away and said it wasn't him. And then they showed him the clothing recovered from his trash bag. He said nothing. Finally, they placed Alyssa's phone on the table, cracked and covered in dirt. Marquis swallowed hard but didn't speak. When detectives asked why he went into her apartment, he denied it repeatedly. When they confronted him with the DNA evidence, he changed his story and said he might have leaned on her door by accident. When they explained that fingerprints were found inside the home, he claimed someone else must have done it. Throughout the entire interrogation, Marquis never confessed. He never provided a motive. He never explained what happened inside Alyssa's apartment. He offered no apology, no remorse, only shifting stories and long stretches of silence. Detectives ended the interview and transferred him to the county jail. The trial began the following spring in Ouachita Parish. Prosecutors presented the synchronized CCTV timeline, DNA results, autopsy findings, and the recovered evidence from Marquis' trash bag. Witnesses testified about his strange behavior around the complex and his habit of pacing near other residents' patios. The defense attempted to argue mistaken identity and question the clarity of the camera footage, but the physical evidence, especially the DNA on multiple surfaces inside Alyssa's home, left little room for doubt. After deliberating, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree burglary. The judge sentenced Marquis to 40 years in state prison without the possibility of early release. The courtroom remained silent as the sentence was read. Alyssa's family spoke briefly afterward, thanking investigators for finding answers, even though those answers came too late to save her. Alyssa Green spent her final night doing what she always did: folding laundry, talking on FaceTime, and settling into her routine. She never saw the man watching her through the patio door, and she didn't know he had memorized her habits. The autopsy confirmed she lost her life within minutes of the intrusion, and the investigation showed how quickly her evening turned from ordinary to deadly. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, and share, and stay tuned for more stories.